Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather, and this update, we're going to be talking about some potent storms with some damaging winds, some large hail, and some isolated tornadoes with torrential rains. So if you do like weather-related content, please subscribe to my channel as I will upload daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. Good morning everyone, this is your June 3rd update. And what we're looking at here, we have an active northwest flow pattern where we get storms that blow up off the Rocky Mountains. That traverses down southeast. We've had a lot of dry air filtering in from Oklahoma into North Texas. Now that superior air mass is more or less into central Texas and the southern Texas. We see this little storm development down here. That was Tropical Storm Blanca that is dissipated out here in the it's still a depression, but it's on its way to dissipate. But that's actually going to be sending impulses of energy through into Texas, into South Texas. We're going to have these developing upper level low pressures that are not going to really, they're going to be basically sitting and spinning more or less all weekend into early next week. That's going to be sending waves of energy, waves of rain. While predominantly off the East Coast today, we're going to have to be dealing with some potent storms. And some of those could be have some large hail to them, some damaging winds. And yeah, an isolated tornado threat is not out of the question. We do see an active monsoon trough here with these waves, these tropical waves, that is kind of getting its Central American gyro region out here in the Caribbean with these daytime heating of thunderstorms. That's sending impulses of rains closer into the Caribbean, you know, filtering into Florida as you kind of heat up in the daytime heating of thunderstorms environment. If we take a look at the old watches and warnings for today, yeah, you can definitely see predominantly out west, it's been high and dry. I mean, Phoenix hit 106 yesterday. A lot of these places are near record heat, if not record heat. These are excessive heat warnings where it's been really dry here into California, parts of Utah, and these are heat advisories up here into Washington and Idaho, as well as Montana. We're talking middle 90s, if not almost 100 degrees in some of these places later on this afternoon. And it's been pretty active along the coast here where we have flash flood watches into the Carolinas, into Virginia. And these gray areas here are your fog advisories this morning. That's in more or less the superior type air mass that they're going to be locked into predominantly for this weekend. So if we take a look at the old Southern Oscillation Index, we kind of see where we've been and where we're going. You can definitely see back in March, yeah, we were predominantly in a La Nina pattern. It was a little bit drier in the southern regions, but ever since then, we've been a steadily increase in precipitation into back into from a La Nina down to up to at an enso neutral now, and it's actually above the deviation line now. So if we take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index, that's basically where we've been. I mean, when this Southern Oscillation Index is closer to the neutral zone, if not more or less into, you know, trending towards El Nino, that's when we see an active subtropical jet. And that's what it's feeding off of, especially with these warmer temperatures in the equatorial Pacific. And that trend looks to continue for the foreseeable future. So if we take a look at the flash index later on this afternoon, these are more or less tropical type atmosphere thunderstorms, and we take it up in the heat of the afternoon as we transition into the noontime hour from noon to 6. That's typically when we see thunderstorm development. So we've got a lot of drier air filtering in from the north, but down here to the south, yeah, we could see some thunderstorm action into much of West Texas and the southern Texas along the coast here. And these are potential, you know, thunderstorm development as we get into the afternoon. It'll be heating up in Florida and along the coast where they've got those flash flood watches taking place in the Carolinas. But these storms could get active as we go transition into the late afternoon into the early evening hours along the East Coast. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has already highlighted a slight risk for severe weather. So I broke these down in all the sectors. So this is later on this afternoon. This is for Thursday, June the 3rd. You can definitely see slight risk for high winds. We're talking 50 upwards to 60 mile per hour winds in parts of Philadelphia, you know, Baltimore into DC, going into New York, going into New Jersey. Those areas could be a little bit more susceptible to seeing those stronger wind gusts with these straight line, squall line thunderstorms. Even but down to the here to the southeast and much of the Carolinas, from New York to to Charlotte to Nashville to Virginia Beach, all the way down to Atlanta, could be under the gun for seeing those higher wind gusts later on this afternoon as these thunderstorms get alive and active. Here's your hail threat. The hail threat is pushed a little bit further into more or less into Columbus, Ohio, into Nashville, Tennessee, into Cincinnati, going into Louisville, Kentucky. Those areas could be a little bit more susceptible to seeing that large hail. Large hail consists of quarter-inch or above. That's typically what they call damaging hail. Anything like pea size, nickel size, dime size, that's not really going to be doing any damage. That's just your average thunderstorms or stronger thunderstorms. But when it turns severe, that basically implies 58 miles an hour or greater, or seeing those large hail, which consists of that 1-inch hail or above. Or obviously, if you see a tornado as well, that would classify as a severe thunderstorm. So as we go throughout the day, yeah, along that leading edge of that squall line, these thunderstorms, we are a little bit more susceptible for an isolated tornado. Now, these areas up here are not, they typically don't see that many tornadoes. So yeah, you could be under the gun just seeing possibly one today. It's not out of the question in Philadelphia, into Baltimore, into DC, back into Raleigh, back into Newark, New Jersey. Those areas are a little bit more susceptible to possibly see a little bit rotation in the atmosphere, and it's not out of the question you could be having a small spin up and a quick spin up. So definitely be on the lookout for that later on this afternoon into the early evening hours. But as we transition into Friday, I kind of depicted here down to the south, you can see it's predominantly where this ridge of high pressure in much of the west and much of the north is going to remain high and dry, but down to the south in that superior type air mass, more or less into central Texas, into South Texas, into southern Texas, along the coast here in Louisiana, and we get that feed off the Gulf, off the Caribbean here into Florida with those daily tropical type rain showers, and then along the coast we'll have that still those thunderstorms transition a little bit further off to the east by then, and that the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted even a marginal risk as we go into the day on Friday with those stronger thunderstorms pushing a little bit further off to the east now. So yeah, it's a lot of these same areas into Philly, into Baltimore, into DC, into Virginia Beach, as well as into Raleigh, could be seeing some of those stronger thunderstorms as we get into the day on Friday. As we transition to Saturday, we take a look down south. Here's that pesky upper level low that's going to be starting to develop into Mexico, and that's going to send pulses of energy down here to the south, and a lot of the places they just don't need it, where they're going to be fighting drier air to the north into Oklahoma and into North Texas. A lot of this wave of energy in the superior type air mass is going to be filtered into much of say Waco, into southern Texas, central Texas, along the coast here in Louisiana, where you see a little bit of those higher dew points where you're closer along the coast. And again, that transition line will be into Florida, as that first wave will try to move off into the northeast, primarily stays dry for much of the Pacific Northwest. As we transition to Sunday, you can see that pesky upper level low just kind of sits and spins, sending pulses of energy. A lot of the energy is going to be more or less from Oklahoma City to eastward into East Texas, into South Texas, to Louisiana, to Arkansas, to Missouri, down here into parts of the southeast. That'll be your day on Sunday, as that low just kind of sits and spins. On Monday, you can definitely see, look at the low pressures. They really don't go anywhere, just sending pulses of energy. So it's not going to rain all day, every day, but yeah, these are tropical type downpours, and this air mass, 1 to 2 inch rainfall rates could be inundated, along this zone, especially the further south you live in Texas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, East Texas. Those areas will be a little bit more susceptible. Lake Charles areas, a lot of these areas, they just don't need the rainfall, are going to get a lot more. This will start to feed a little bit further off into the southeast, where you've been primarily dry in areas of the southeast. Now we're going to transition into a little bit more wetter pattern as all this is kind of merging together for you guys, and that will help with some of the drought that you might be experiencing, especially into Florida. Some of those areas are going to be picking up daily rain showers, and that's going to eat away in the drought out there, where it primarily stays dry in the west and the Pacific Northwest and much of the north, where you're going to be predominantly under that ridge of high pressure. Where you're not under the hit ridge of high pressure, there's the low, not going anywhere, sending pulses of energy. And this is Tuesday now, so you can definitely see it's not really going to go anywhere anytime soon, sending pulses of energy throughout the weekend, throughout much of early next week, along the coast, Louisiana, Arkansas, into much of the southeast, going to the Ohio Valley, as a lot of this will just, more or less, have that dividing line of this boundary here of more or less dry, and then you have your superior type air mass, more or less a tropical type air mass as we go into Wednesday. Again, it's a lot of the same areas. You can almost draw a line here into much of central Texas, eastward into Oklahoma, into Arkansas and Louisiana, and parts of the southeast. That'll transition into the Ohio Valley, getting into the mid-Atlantic states with some of that, rain showers and stronger thunderstorms. By then, more likely in the daytime heating of the afternoon. There's Thursday. There's the low. I mean, it's just one day after another into South Texas, into more or less into a lot of the same areas as we transition even into Thursday by June the 10th. So these areas are just not going to change the pattern anytime soon. There's the latest GFS model as far as precipitation goes. Predominantly pretty dry out west and much of the northern interiors, where we do have that ridge of high pressure. Now, this ridge of high pressure is going to be breaking down as it transitions from the west to the east. And as that does, on the backside, we're able to be filtering in some cooler air, more instability, and that's going to be able to allow some rain showers to move back into the picture into, early next week into the Dakota states, into Minnesota, and to Wisconsin. So you are going to be experiencing that. But down to the south, you can definitely see where that low pressure just kind of sits and spins all week, predominantly from North Texas into Central Texas. And the further south you live into Texas, the more rain you're going to get, especially along the coast, especially into Louisiana and Arkansas, along the Mississippi corridor here. And then we have that tropical feed off the East Coast as well. So Florida, along the East Coast, along the Ohio Valley, into the Northeast are going to be impacted with those heavier rains. There's the European model, even deviates the transition line even greater, with it primarily high and dry for much of the west and the central and northwest, and then primarily wet for much of the south and southeast and much of the Ohio Valley into the northeast. And you can take a look at the temperatures, basically implies the same thing. Where the ridge is, you have a lot less rain. You're basically high and dry underneath those underneath that air mass, under the sunny skies. There's where your record heat's going to be, near record heat, much of the west, much of the north, as it transitions to much of the northeast by early next week. But yeah, underneath those cloud cover, underneath the rain showers and some of the flooding rains, it's primarily below average for Kansas to Oklahoma and all of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, into a lot of the parts of the southeast, where you're going to have that unstable air mass moving forward. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.